Before kings trembled, before seas would one day open, before a nation would walk toward freedom, a child was born under a sentence of death. In time when fear ruled Egypt and hope seemed lost, a family chose courage, one mother chose faith, one child was hidden, protected, and praised upon the waters of the Nile, not abandoned, but entrusted to God. This is the beginning of the life of Moses.
A life preserved for a purpose greater than any palace could contain. Tonight, we witness how deliverance began quietly, with a birth, a basket, and the unseen hand of God guiding history. In the land of Egypt, long after Joseph had died, a new king arose who did not remember what God had done through him. The people of Israel had grown many and strong, and this frightened Pharaoh. Out of fear, he forced them into harsh slavery. Their days were filled with heavy labor, their nights with exhaustion, yet they continued to multiply. So Pharaoh made a cruel decree that every Hebrew baby boy must be cast into the Nile River. It was a time when hope seemed hidden beneath suffering. During these dark days, a child was born to a Levite family. His father was Amram and his mother Jochebed. They were people of faith, living quietly among their oppressed nation. They already had 2 children, a daughter named Miriam and a son named Aaron. When Jochebed looked upon her newborn son, she saw something precious and determined to protect him. For 3 months she hid him, guarding his life with courage and prayer. But a growing child cannot remain hidden forever. When it became impossible to conceal him, Jochebed prepared a small basket made from papyrus reeds. She sealed it carefully so water could not enter. With a mother's trembling hope, she placed the child inside and set the basket among the reeds along the Nile River. Miriam stood at a distance, watching silently, her heart fixed on her little brother's fate. On that very day, Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river to bathe. She noticed the basket and ordered her servant to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the crying child. Instead of anger, compassion filled her heart. Though she recognized him as a Hebrew child, she chose mercy over the decree of her father. Miriam approached with courage beyond her years and asked if she should find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child. Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam quickly brought Jochebed, the child's own mother. In a turn only God could arrange, the mother who hid the child was now paid to care for him openly and safely. Pharaoh's daughter later adopted the child as her own son. She named him Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." Exodus 2 verse 10. Thus the child born under a sentence of death was raised in the house of a king. As Moses grew, he lived within Pharaoh's palace. He was taught the knowledge of Egypt. He learned leadership, language, and the ways of royalty. He wore fine garments and walked among princes, yet his origin was never erased. He was born a Hebrew, and deep within him lived the awareness of his people's suffering. Years passed, and Moses became a man. One day he went out from the palace to observe the burdens of the Israelites. He saw their pain, their forced labor, and the cruelty of their taskmasters. His heart was stirred with compassion and indignation. During this time he witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Looking around and seeing no one to intervene, Moses struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. It was an act born from anger at injustice, but it changed the course of his life. The next day he saw 2 Hebrews fighting and attempted to bring peace between them. But one of them challenged him, saying, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" Exodus 2 verse 14. In that moment, Moses realized his deed was known. Word reached Pharaoh, and the king sought to kill him. The prince who had grown in privilege now faced death from the house that raised him. Moses fled Egypt and journeyed into the land of Midian. The palace was behind him. The power, the comfort, the status, all left behind. The child drawn from the river had become a man shaped by conflict, identity, and divine preservation. He had been saved from death as an infant. He had been raised among rulers. He had witnessed suffering and acted in defense of the oppressed. Though he did not yet know it, his life had been guided from the beginning. The God who preserved him in the waters would one day call him to deliver a nation. And so the story of Moses continues, from the palace of Egypt to the wilderness, where preparation for a greater calling had only just begun. So the child once hidden among the reeds grew into a man shaped by two worlds, born among slaves, raised among rulers. His life was preserved when death surrounded him. His path was redirected when power could not hold him. He left Egypt not as a prince, but as a fugitive. Yet what appeared to be loss was preparation. What seemed like an ending was only the beginning of God's greater plan. The God who protected a child in the river was still guiding his steps beyond the palace walls. And the story is not finished. In the wilderness, far from Egypt, a moment was approaching that would change history forever, a calling that would awaken a deliverer and set a nation on the path to freedom. This is only the beginning of the journey. After fleeing Egypt, the life of Moses changed completely. The man who once walked among princes now walked alone across desert lands. The heat of the wilderness replaced the comfort of the palace. The sound of royal courts was replaced by silence and wind over the sand. Yet this place of exile would become a place of preparation. Moses arrived in the land of Midian and rested beside a well. It was there he witnessed an injustice that stirred the same compassion that had once moved him in Egypt. Several daughters of a priest of Midian had come to draw water for their father's flock, but shepherds drove them away. Moses rose, defended them, and helped water their animals. When the women returned home earlier than expected, their father asked how this had happened. They told him of an Egyptian who had rescued them. Their father, whose name was Jethro, sent for the stranger. Moses was welcomed into his household and given a place among them. Time passed, and Moses was given Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters, as his wife. They built a quiet life in Midian. A son was born to them, and Moses named him Gershom, saying that he had been a stranger in a foreign land. The name reflected his heart, a man between two identities, shaped by Egypt but belonging to Israel. Moses became a shepherd, tending the flocks of his father-in-law. Day after day he led sheep through rugged terrain. He learned patience, endurance, and watchfulness. The wilderness formed him in ways the palace never could. Years passed in quiet obscurity, yet the suffering of Israel continued far away in Egypt. During this time, the Israelites groaned under their bondage. Their cry for help rose upward. Scripture tells us, God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant. Exodus 2 verse 24. The moment of calling was drawing near. One day, while leading the flock beyond the wilderness, Moses came to the mountain of Horeb. There he saw something that arrested his attention completely. A bush was burning with fire, yet it was not consumed. The flames were real, yet the branches remained whole. He turned aside to see this great sight. Then a voice called to him from the midst of the fire, "Moses, Moses." He answered, "Here I am." The voice spoke again. "Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground." Exodus 3 verse 5. In that moment, the shepherd understood he was in the presence of God. The voice declared, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Hearing this, Moses hid his face, afraid to look upon God. God spoke of what he had seen and heard, the suffering of his people in Egypt, their oppression, their cry for deliverance. Then came the words that would define Moses' life. "I have come down to deliver them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people out of Egypt." The man who had fled Egypt was now commanded to return. Moses struggled with fear and doubt. He questioned his worthiness, his ability, and even how he should speak to Israel. He asked what name he should give when the people asked who had sent him. God answered with a declaration of eternal authority, "I am who I am." He revealed himself as the God who simply is, unchanging, sovereign, and faithful. Still Moses hesitated. He feared rejection. He feared failure. He feared that his voice would not be heard. Yet God provided assurance. He promised his presence. He gave signs of power. He declared that Moses would not stand alone. God told him that his brother Aaron would meet him and speak on his behalf. The two brothers, separated by years and circumstance, would be joined in a mission greater than either could imagine. After this encounter, Moses returned to his family and prepared to leave Midian. The shepherd would walk again toward Egypt, not as a prince, not as a fugitive, but as a messenger sent by God. He carried no army. He bore no weapon of power. Yet he carried a calling that would confront kings and break chains. The wilderness that once seemed like an ending had become a beginning. The man hidden in obscurity had been chosen to stand before Pharaoh. The God who spoke from fire would now act in power. And so Moses set his face toward Egypt, carrying the promise that deliverance was at hand and that the cries of Israel had not been forgotten. And so the shepherd who once fled in fear now walked forward with purpose. The quiet wilderness had become holy ground, and the voice from the fire had changed everything. The man who doubted his strength had been entrusted with a mission greater than any power on earth. The cries of Israel had been heard, and the time of deliverance was drawing near. From a child preserved in the waters, to a prince in Egypt, to a shepherd in Midian, the life of Moses was being guided step by step by the hand of God. What seemed like exile was preparation. What seemed like weakness would soon reveal divine power. The journey back to Egypt was about to begin, a journey that would confront kings, reveal God's might, and lead a nation toward freedom. If you want to continue walking through these powerful moments of Scripture, subscribe to Bible Scenes and Stories by Uncle Sag and stay with us as the story unfolds. The next chapter will bring us face to face with Pharaoh, where faith will stand against power and the promise of deliverance will begin to take form.
If you love this work of God and you support this ministry, please subscribe to Bible Scenes and Stories by Uncle Sajik, like, comment, and share.